Most High, we ask that I may speak with your voice, that we may hear with you. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. It is my parents' will, says Christ, that I should lose nothing of all God has given to me, and that I should raise it on the last day. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. May Christ be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Good News according to the book of Luke.
Glory to you, O Christ.
A little later, Jesus went to a city called Nain. His disciples and a great crowd traveled with him. As he approached the city gate, a dead man was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When he saw her, Jesus had compassion for her and said, "Don't cry." He stepped forward and touched the stretcher on which the dead man was being carried. Those carrying him stood still. Jesus said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Awestruck, everyone praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help God's people." This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding region. This is the gospel of our Christ.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So we've got some fairly heavy readings this year for All Saints. And I kind of want to talk about the context of these things a little bit, because we're so mindful of our own context right now. So the wisdom of Sirach, this book of wisdom that we've been in for a while, the wisdom writings were mystics. And this is a belief that carried on at some points in Judaism, but hadn't really lasted that actively in the time of Jesus, from what we think we know. Last I checked, I'm going to look at my seminarian to find out whether that's, we haven't gotten it. Okay. So this idea of the souls who do what is right in God's hands. There were even people in the time of Jesus who didn't believe in a life after death at all. There's a solid group of people. So we try to struggle with what we look for in God. And here, what Sirach is finding is that these people's life sucked for a bit. And it looked like death wasn't a good thing. But it was a coming to unity with God. And so the Christians looked at this writing and said, well, we're totally down with this ourselves, and grabbed it. But be aware that we've always got the older context in these. And this is why when we do our Tanakh reading, which I do sometimes winkingly call the Torah portion, although that is very much a rabbinic Jewish thing, and I'm only going to do that for a little reminder that we owe our roots there and nothing more. We know that we are on a path that is greatly different. But we found common ground at this point. And so we have that tension, right? And that's why we say, here's what the Spirit says to the people of God. Because this is part of the Jewish covenant, these writings. And we take learning from it, but we need to remember whose it is. And then we get into the Psalm, which again is still part of that rooted thing. And it's asking God to establish justice because I'm trying to do it right with you. Make it right around me. That's kind of what we're after here. Make me clean in what I'm doing. Help me know how to do well, because I want to be around your altar. I want to be thanking you. I want to not only love the beauty of being with God, but bring that forward, because my feet stand on the level ground of having a loving God. And we see that love in Sirach, we see it in the Psalm, and then we see it in Romans. And Paul's saying nobody, nothing can separate us from that cosmic love that is God. Nothing. Nothing that we're going through, nothing that people who claim to speak for God can say against us separates God from us. They're only voicing their separation from us, and certainly how I understand God. And our response to that needs to be in that love. To stay in that love, to stay around the altar, to stay in the beauty of God's house, and be full members of God's house. And then we get to Luke, and we get to a story that people don't talk about a whole lot. Not just a little girl and Lazarus that Jesus calls back. We don't know the name of this young man, partly because he's an illustration. We know what city, and we know the circumstance. But the individual doesn't seem to matter as much as the point. And the point is that a widow had nothing and was left entirely alone and entirely without support. And that in that time of alone and without support and an utter bereftness, Jesus walked up and touched the stretcher, didn't even touch the body, touched the stretcher, and said, "Young man, get up." And Jesus gave him to his mother. This may as well have been a parable. That when you're all alone, God has that mercy and sends somebody to be those hands. That heart. And it can be pretty astounding how that happens. So when we're looking at all of these things, we're seeing a through line of love. And we're seeing a love that echoes through several thousand years. We're not even sure when Sirach was written again, last I know. We all struggle with how we see God and with how we see that connection and we see love. And it's hard for us to see it in the abstract. We actually need it in the hands and the feet and the words of people that we encounter. We need that encounter. And that's where saints, official and personal, come in. To be that little more approachable metaphor. Because humans don't do abstract well. And not all of us ever get an opportunity to feel that divine hug. And so we get the physical ones, and we get the teachings of how to live from people who've actually lived to add to the teachings we have of Jesus. And some of those people are very close to us. Some of those people we knew for years, some of those people we had one encounter with, but they had a moment where they brought God to us. And we're in a thin time of the year, and my pagan colleagues were busy doing Samhain last night, and naming and remembering their dead, and drinking the last of the water that has drops of whiskey in it. I think I followed that recently a little bit. I got a whole rundown Friday night. That there's water of life that they drink until the dark time, and then they have a water, I think they called it turning in, where they omit the whiskey. So we all have our ways that we deal with this time of shortening days, lengthening nights, colder winds, more rain, the bareness of the trees, and the quiet that comes in that time. the dark season of the year. And it brings its time to remember. And it brings its time where we defiantly raise up light in the darkness with all of our celebrations. And so the church actually does recognize as holy All Hallows, All Saints, and All Souls. It's a 3-day thing. And it's to make sure that we understand that there are things wonderful beyond our understanding. And there are people who have just blown it out of the water, done it right. And there are people who have warmed our hearts, done it right. And there's a time to be grateful for and remember all of them. And that's this time. And so we're going to give our statement of faith. And then we're going to remember some of the people that we pray with. Because one of the things about our faith is that we don't pretend that God's time locked. We try not to pretend that God's anything locked. That we can't limit God. We can't limit God in now. We can't limit God's people in now. And that the people that loved and taught us have not stopped to being. They've changed their being. And their example is still a blessing. And once in a while, we may hear their voice. And that's fully within our faith. And so we mark and remember all of those people before we begin our prayers. So let's talk a little bit, and then we'll do our shared statement of faith. And then we'll light some candles and remember some people and share a PowerPoint picture.